Greetings, fellow scribes! Welcome back to the archive. This week I begin a brief focus on more obscure games. I will be starting this period with the two-part series on the game Coriolis, with this week focusing on the setting and next week focusing on the systems. Coriolis, the Third Horizon, is a mostly hard sci-fi game. There are fantastical elements in it, but those can be ignored or explained away as just psychological archetypes. But with all that, I look forward to talking about this game, so sit back, relax, and enjoy as I talk about Coriolis, the Third Horizon. The homeworld of humanity was a world called Al-Arda. This was a world of cities covering whole continents, of skyscrapers so tall they breached the atmosphere, and a sky that was crystal blue. And it was a dying world, despite this beauty. And so humanity looked up to the sky, and it sent out many ships for colonization attempts. Two of these ships were sent on a very long journey, the Zenith and the Nadir. Their journey would last over 1,000 years. Near the end of the journey, the Nadir was lost. What happened to it? That is a mystery. But the Zenith arrived at its destination world. The Zenith had traveled with colonists in cryosleep, and the crews forming families that would do the same jobs for all these centuries. And when they arrived at their world, they arrived at their destination, they found it had already been inhabited by humans. Finding their destination already inhabited, and in fact having been colonized for over 500 years, the crew of the Zenith was put in a quandary. What to do? First they had to find out what happened. And they sent out people exploring around the area quickly. And they found the history. They found that after their departure, portals were found. These are mysterious artifacts that were built by another lost race. And these are always close to a sun. And the area that was within one portal jump from Al-Arda became known as the First Horizon. And that was the first area of exploration and expansion. And humanity flowed into there. And then, eventually, they expanded further into a new region that would be called the Second Horizon. The Second Horizon and the First Horizon had some sort of conflict. No one knows what happened or what created it, but there was some ideological schism between the two. As a result, exploration led to the foundation of the Third Horizon, an area as far away from the other two. And what ended up happening from this is you had all these people come and colonize this new area. People who were trying to get away from the people of the First and Second Horizons. And of course the First and Second Horizons couldn't let people get away. Couldn't let people flee. And so they began to send forces out to force these people under their thumb. And the peoples of the Third Horizon waged a war. And eventually they forced the forces of the First and Second Horizons to one system. And the battle that was waged there destroyed the system. And destroyed the portals back to the First and Second Horizons, cutting off the Third Horizon from the older eras of humanity. So, these newcomers, the Zenithians, had to figure out what they were going to do. And what they did, they moved their ship, the Zenith, to a new, more central location. And they used it to turn it into a gigantic space station as they woke up the colonists. Well, actually, the colonists were woken up in the debates by a renegade faction among the crew that thought, well, let's wake the colonists up and let them decide what we do. And what ended up happening is the station was set up, and then they started sending people out. As a result of the Portal Wars, many of the various systems and factions became insular and isolationist. And what happened with the Zenithians is they sent their people out. They brought new ways of thinking because they weren't from the horizon as it existed at this time. And because of this, they brought trade, they brought diplomacy back into the Third Horizon. And by doing that, they began to bring people out. And they created a council of factions on their space station of Coriolis. And this council of factions is the sort of de facto government of that space station, but it also acts as a sort of UN, trying to work out peaceful resolutions to disputes. Now, recently, having risen from the depths of a gas giant, is a group of entities called emissaries. And they are described as ghosts from another world. What they are, no one exactly knows. What is known is, once they materialized, once they came out, a number of them went to Coriolis demanding a seat on the Council of Factions. But also, as a result, where they passed, psychic abilities began to manifest. Things unseen outside of the more mystic and religious orders. And that is the state of where the setting is as you start. You have people who are spontaneously, regardless of caste, place, birth, order, faction, whatnot, are getting psychic powers. You've got, for the first time in centuries, trade and commerce going through all these planets in the Third Horizon. And that's where we start. The Third Horizon is split into 10 major factions. And these 10 major factions are split between two overarching philosophies. On one hand, you have the 5 Zenithian factions. On the other hand, you have the 5 First Come factions. The 5 First Come factions are philosophizing that religious debate is an essential part of politics and business. They put extensive religious debates into any contract or treaty that they form. This is because to them, the religion is as important, if not more important, than whatever deal they're making. The Zenithian factions, on the other hand, put pragmatism and effectiveness as more important than religion. They might believe in the icon religion, but to them, it is not part of business. Make that contract for the 10,000 units of water from this planet to this planet. Fine and dandy. Don't get your religious aspects involved. Just figure out the most effective route and how much we're getting paid. Is a Zenithian approach. First Come, they might not even trade. They might view the water as sacred to the planet, yada yada, and not want to trade it at all. So, that's sort of what you deal with there. That's the major source of conflict. Of course, just because one is from a First Come group does not mean one's faction is First Come. Just because one's from a group of people that came on the Zenith does not mean one's faction is Zenithian. The Legion has been part of the Third Horizon for well before the Zenith ever showed up. And yet they are considered a Zenithian faction because any group with a standing military is going to generally put effectiveness and pragmatism over religious dogma. Meanwhile, among the First Come factions are the Draconites. They're the faction that let all the passengers on the Zenith out from cold sleep and then skedaddled. Got out of there in the chaos. They're considered a First Come faction. So your origin doesn't really determine what faction you are. It is the philosophy that you follow. Of course, there's a lot more than just your individual faction. There is the where you come from. And the people of the Third Horizon can be divided into 4 groups. The First Come, the Zenithians, Starfarers, and Humanites. The First Come are the people originally in the area, the first settlers of the Third Horizon. And at one point they were fairly homogenous as a group. Fairly homogenous culture, specific religion, and language and all that. But over a period of time, cultural drift and isolationism following the Portal Wars in what was called the Long Night, with the isolationism that involved, language is fragmented. Cultural drift caused them to speak differently, to worship the icons differently. In fact, the only thing common between all of them is the icon religion. Of course, the Zenithians are an interesting case. There are more people who identify themselves as Zenithians than it is even possible given the size of the Ark ship. Now, this is partly because you've had 2 generations of marriages and couplings between Zenithians and first-comers. But at the same time, you've got to deal with the fact that, saying you're Zenithian to latch on to a group that is now politically powerful, that is now doing good stuff and ending decades to centuries of isolation, it's popular. So, while first-comers are a more genetic and light, linked to the past, those who are identifying themselves as Zenithians are kind of more identifying as they're linked to the present and future, that they're wanting to push away that old life. And then between the two, you have the Starfarers. And since the Zenith has arrived, with spaceships being more commonly available, the Starfarers have increased in numbers. But you have to look at it like this. No matter how you look at it, there is a finite amount of people that planets can support. Yes, you can build off-world settlements, off-world space stations and colonies, and expand that. But even then, there's a finite amount of resources that can be sustained on planets or in systems. And so, given the choice between living in poverty on some planet or going off to the stars, people are going to choose not having a home, going to the stars, becoming space nomads effectively. And that is what the Starfarers are. The people who've shed any identity of the past or tied to a planet. They are neither Zenithian nor first-comer. They are Starfarers. They are their ship and crew. And that's how they see themselves. And then you have the last group of peoples, the Humanites. And these are people that are looked down upon by everyone. Zenithians, Starfarer, first-comer alike. It's because they are not purely human. Yes, they are still human, but they've had tweaks done to them. They were engineered for specific purposes. And as such, they're seen as imperfect, bad omens type thing. And so, no one really likes having to deal with them. They're still people, though. They still have dreams and hopes and desires. They still want to be accepted, etc., etc. So, their life is one of what you would expect. They want to be accepted. They want to be valued. But yet, so many people just look down upon them because of stuff that was beyond their control. Generations ago, someone bred them to be able to, say, have gills and work on an aquatic world, or have finer, more subtle features to be better at being courtesans, and things like that. Just kind of, they're stuck with these. They don't have a say, and so they have to live with the scorn of others simply for being born different. The final part of the puzzle that is the society and culture of Coriolis is the icon religion. And on one hand, this is a fairly standard polytheistic religion. There are the 9 icons, each representing one key aspect of something. The messenger represents the protector of those who carry news, those who pray, and of course the deliverer of omens. The dancer, often depicted as a man, often depicted as a woman, often depicted as androgynous and unable to tell which, is the entity that represents the joining of man and woman in wedded union. Is also, when depicted as the musician bearing a 9-stringed lyre, is the entity of unbridled lust. Of course, the gambler is the patron for the intelligent and the gifted and the adventurous. Those who luck is a big part of things for them. The deckhand is, blesses homes and ships and stores, is sort of the icon of honest work. The merchant is prosperity, forward thinking, and success. The traveler is the protector of those who travel. The navigator, the guide, all of that. The Lady of Tears is the mourner, the one who's said to accompany the dead as they go towards judgment at the judge. And the judge is the one who represents justice and is also the judge of people's fate in the afterlife. And then finally, there is the Faceless One. This is the obligatory evil deity. Although he's not necessarily evil, it's just the Faceless One exists to be the one who messes up all the plans of gods and men. In various depictions, the Faceless One will be shown doing things like moving items that the other icons needed and hiding them, or just moving them and taking them away and carrying them off. And that's pretty much what the Faceless One does. It messes with everyone's plans. And it is said that the Faceless One is connected to the madness that comes when someone makes a portal jump outside of stasis and faces the dark between the stars. but that could just be rumor. Of course, there are a number of explicit religious practices of the Church of the Icons. Now, most of them are kind of split on one of these. The worlds of Mira, Zalos, and Sadal do not practice the mission. But basically, the mission is one of the first tenets. And it is that, one must separate themselves from their home world and go off traveling for a couple years, just preaching and trying to spread the faith. Now, the next tenet is one that has different approaches to it as well. The life bond. The older, more conservative groups say that this has to be between man and woman, while more moderate ones go, well, if the purpose of the life bond was for procreation, well, it doesn't matter thanks to what science has developed. So men can have children thanks to artificial wombs. Women can have children thanks to all that technology. And so it doesn't really matter the gender or sex. But the big thing is that the life bond is intended as for life. There's no real thing as divorce in the Church of the Icons. And in fact, it is expected that if one partner dies before the other, that the survivor, the widow or widower, spends the rest of their life in mourning. Yeah. And of course, there's a whole list of these. Example that the once a year a believer should openly profess their faith in public. Homes, businesses, and shops and ships should be blessed. During the segment of the calendar year devoted to the merchant, between dawn and dusk, during morning and day watch, the faithful are expected to fast. There are two holy sites, the Dome of the Icons on Coriolis and the Icon City on Mira. And some consider the Temple City Lotus on Debaran as one of the holy sites as well. And it's expected someone should go through a pilgrimage to all three sites. Giving alms, giving stuff to the poor, praying twice a day at dawn and dusk, and confessing your sins to an anointed priest or priestess are all part of the practices of the Church of the Icons. Now, of course, you can see some commonalities between these and some other real-world religions, but let's not go there. Let's just say that the setting is heavily inspired by Arabian Nights, and there are supernatural entities in the setting called jinn. And beyond that, let's just accept that surface similarities are just surface similarities. With all that said, though, that is all I have for this week on Coriolis Third Horizon. Next week, I will be talking about the mechanics of the system. So until then, I'd like you all to remember, have fun and keep gaming.